What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you, as always, with the one, the only, the certified fantabulous, the I would never trade him no matter how high his caloric intake got per day, Mr. Grant Hughes. We're here to talk about the blockbuster Markieff Morris trade between the Dallas Mavericks and the Los Angeles Lakers. We're going to get into the trade details right away. There's not going to be too much of a pause other than I feel confident in saying, Grant, that this is the most shocking trade in NBA history, and it's potentially kill two birds, one stone, the dumbest one as well. But before we really dig in here, how are you doing?
I'm still, I'm reeling because PJ Tucker isn't a Clipper anymore, and I don't know how to process
And
that.
Steve Ballmer's not paying the tax. What
It's
is
really
this?
hard, Dan. I mean, you think we kind of knew that Tucker might get traded, but no, so the last time we did this, I think was the Kyrie Irving trade to Dallas, ironically.
Which was like the trade. It's I guess going to the Mavericks was a little surprising, but the trade itself, like that wasn't a shock.
No. Okay, let's lay out. Do you have the parameters up top? We should just put the trade up.
Let's throw those on screen. The full trade details that I actually can't believe that I am reading at the moment. The Dallas Mavericks receive Anthony Davis and Max Christie, as well as the Lakers' 2029 first rounder. Shame on Los Angeles for not getting any protections on that, right? I mean, what kind of negotiating is this? They got $55,000 in cash from the Jazz. What's up, Utah? The Los Angeles Lakers get Luka Doncic, Maxi Kleber, and Markieff Morris, as well as $55,000 in cash from Utah. And the Utah Jazz get Jalen Hood-Schifino, expiring contract, and 2 second-round picks. They get the Clippers 2025 second from the Lakers, as well as what will end up being Dallas's 2025 second, I believe, as well. I mean, I think the team to start with on this is it has to be the Mavericks. This is unlike anything we've ever seen, Grant. So I wanted to just get to a couple quotes on this from Nico Harrison himself before we dig into our questions and I throw it to you. So Nico Harrison to ESPN's Tim McMahon said, I believe that defense wins championships. I believe that getting an all defensive center and an all NBA player with a defensive mindset gives us a better chance. We're built to win now and in the future. Very weird thing to say when you got older as part of this trade, but whatever. The other thing he recently said to the Dallas Morning News's Brad Townsend was, we really feel like we got ahead of what was going to be a tumultuous summer. Teams have been loading up to try to sign Luka once he becomes available. Again, that was to the Dallas Morning News. And the note kind of on that final note here is Dallas had, quote, major concerns about moving forward with Luka Doncic due to his constant conditioning issues and the looming commitment of another Supermax contract extension this summer. That was from McMahon again. The Supermax would have been worth 5 years and $345 million. And Nico Harrison saying that they were trying to get out in front of teams going after Luka in free agency. He wasn't actually slated for free agency this summer. That would have been a player option he had for the summer of 2026. So here we are. And I think we need to tackle it from the Mavs perspective. Grant, just what are your, and you don't have to read the cards on screen. That's just prompts for people. Like how are you feeling? What do you like? What is going on here for you?
So I think this is still real fresh. And in a situation like this, where it seems to me, and I think everyone kind of agrees what the take should be on this, which is that what is Dallas doing? Like incredulity, right? Like this is unthinkable. I don't know what the list of the least likely players to be traded in the NBA as of last night would have been, but Doncic is in the top 5, maybe like second. Like Wemby might be the only guy I would say at 100% is less likely to be traded than Doncic. And he's been traded. And so I'm trying really hard to accept, or like to find and then figure out ways to accept justifications from the Mavs. That second one that you put up there about concerns about getting out ahead of it or whatever, I hadn't seen that. I'd seen the conditioning. I'd seen Nico Harrison's quote about defense wins championships. The second one is the only one where it's like, oh, okay, so that suggests to me that Dallas had an inkling, independent of conditioning issues or its own internal concerns, that maybe Luka was not only going to be pursued in free agency, although no one's going to be able to offer him the $345 million deal that Dallas could have, and he's interested in that. So like, let's do something now because there's a possibility he just gets signed away somehow, right? Don't believe that's a sufficient justification. And then we get back to, even if that's true, why don't you try to win a championship this year or next year before you do this? And secondly, and this is really the kicker, I think, that just makes it almost impossible to defend this from Dallas's perspective. I'll just say makes it impossible, is why didn't you open the bidding up? Like, what is the reason for just shopping him, right? Because that was the other report, is that Dallas initiated this. It wasn't the Lakers putting in a call. It was Dallas going to the Lakers and saying, hey, want him? And the Lakers are like, who is this? How did you get Nico Harrison's phone? Is he okay? I just like, what is the justification? This is an impossible question to put to you. Is there a justification, I guess, for not opening the bidding up and doing better than what Dallas got? Because Anthony Davis is an all-NBA player. He's really good. You can make some argument that him and Kyrie is like a more sensible pairing, I guess, than Luka and Kyrie, if you want to just be devil's advocate about it. But like, you could have done better. There must be teams that would have offered someone as good or better than Davis and more picks, right? Like, why not open this up?
So Amick said that they called at least one other team, and if it's one team, I assume it was the Bucks about Giannis, just because I can't see OKC. Shea would make sense, just like a similar pairing between Kyrie and Luka with better defense. But why would OKC do that when they're the top of the Western Conference? It's like you wouldn't trade Shea. But I would. The thing I would push, and I'm going to play, and I know you will too. I'm going to try and play a lot of devil's advocate here.
We got to
try and understand this from the Mavs perspective, because this is insufficient. I think perhaps the most shocking thing here, like the quote to the Dallas Morning News, at least makes it seem like, all right, maybe they haven't said anything about it, but Luka, his eyes were kind of wandering, or he hadn't guaranteed something, because the weight management stuff, the conditioning, the complaining to referees, like, I get it. He still led you to the finals, has been brilliant in the playoffs when he's healthy. And then I've also thought, like, is there just something sinister going on with the calf strain here, or that calf that he's had issues with in the past? And as we'll talk about later, the Lakers want him to debut before the All-Star break. And so I'm like, well, they have the medicals, I'm assuming, so that must not mean that there's something wild here. So I don't understand. Even you saying, okay, Kyrie and Anthony Davis is a sensible pairing than Luka, maybe not when he's playing with another big. And by the way, to the Lakers' credit, Anthony Davis wanted a center, and they gave him Derek Lively. They did it. They did it. Also fascinating about that too, the AD waving this. And this is what I'm getting at. The fact that none of these players, including LeBron, had any idea, and I don't want to get too much into the Lakers, this never happens. I cannot stress this enough. The amount of people that I know who actually know things, like, not that I have sources, but the people that I know that have sources, they were floored. Everyone was floored about this. The reporting around LeBron not knowing seems to be accurate. The reporting around AD not knowing seems to be accurate. The fact that Stein said that about Luka, it's accurate. And so I don't know what the impetus actually could, like, and if you're the Mavericks, you have every incentive to let it out that immediately the framing was, well, we didn't know if he was going to stick around, but instead you made it seem like you were trying to do this at the peak of his value. And I would say to you, the only danger, the thing I would disagree with, I know you were playing devil's advocate, who is the better player? Because they could have gotten more draft equity from a bunch of teams. It's clear they didn't want that. And when I was thinking about it, who is the player that would be better than Anthony Davis that they could have gotten back in a Luka trade? And let's assume that the Bucks said no to Giannis, because I think that might have been the only, because one, Anthony Davis is one of this season, the 10 to 15 best players in the league or whatever. So I just don't know what other team was going to send you that player. And so maybe that's why you don't open up the bidding, because there's only value add there to me if you're actually looking for that draft pick and prospect return special, which to what Nico said, we're built to win now and later. I don't like even the now part. You could justify it as like, well, if Luka's not going to play again this season, yes, you have a better chance of winning the title this year with Davis, but that doesn't even seem like it's the case.
The mind reels. Like, so just thinking of teams, because I think if you're, I don't know, just let's go through it. If you go to Houston, can you get Amin Thompson, who knows, pick somebody else, and a bunch like 5-6 firsts, something. Houston, like,
Do you think that
It's an
makes you?
impossible question to answer
Yeah,
because the Mavericks did not engage in this kind of, well, let's go see, like let's start a bidding war. Uh, but it is okay. So let's say they go around and just because it's like right before the deadline and everybody in the league is like, where did this come from? You can't do better than this. I think you just still don't. Then the answer is don't trade Luka Doncic. Then the answer is wait until this summer. The answer is do everything you can to get to the point of if he wants out, you can still say, how about $345 million
right.
versus whatever you're gonna. What is it's in the twos? I can't remember the numbers, but he's not going to get anything close to this.
He can sign for 4 years and 229 this summer, basically with the Lakers,
And or do like a 2+1 or whatever
which he's gonna do.
get the 10 years of service and then sign the 35% max. So like, yeah, you know, maybe he knows he's gonna make so much money over his career that's like not a crazy option for him. I just so here's what I keep circling back to, and I wonder if you feel this way or if this is just a thing that I always do in situations like this. There must be something we don't know. Right? Isn't that I just like I might be wrong and like it's totally possible that Dallas just made a massive mistake, right? Like
Mhm.
that is the simplest explanation is Dallas just did a dumb thing. And that's what everybody is saying, I think. And so I'm resistant to just hopping on that train of thought and being like, yeah, that's what it is. Because I just assume that people in the positions that the Mavs decision makers are must know at least as much as we do and should know more because they're just around Luka. They have all this, you know, first boots on the ground, like first person intel. They just know more. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what would be a satisfactory explanation to me that would justify this from Dallas's perspective and take us out of the realm of this was just stupid and short-sighted and hasty. But then we're just guessing, right? It's like, oh, you know, total wild speculation, but it's like the conditioning is tied to like some other bigger problem that he has that he can't overcome, or like he's terrible in the locker room, or he just is awful to be around as a teammate, or like, so I don't want this stuff to come out, like, because that's
Right.
just bad if this person is going through having a hard time or whatever, but it's like the pieces just don't fit. And I'm just unsatisfied with any of the most charitable explanations you could make for Dallas. Maybe we'll talk through it. Maybe we'll get there. But do you come back to that, or are you more ready to get on the, you know, to move over to where conventional wisdom is, which is just that Dallas is insane?
I mean, that's what it seems. Dallas has lost their mind, is what it seems like to me. But I have the same inclination as you because you want to understand. And these look, we were wrong about the Mavs trade deadline last year,
Yep.
and like the body of work that Nico Harrison has now put together for the most part, I think you respect.
We were
And
wrong
think you
about
can-
Kyrie.
right.
I thought it was a catastrophe when
We've
they
hated
traded for
all
him.
the trades that they've made in real time, and then they've panned out. Maybe this is one of them, but we either need more information or something like, is he just not going to stay healthy in LA? And I also, the two things that stand out though, so the whole, if you want to focus on the conditioning and the stamina, you didn't want to pay him. If you don't want to pay Luka Doncic, who are you willing to pay? And so I've seen some people say, is this a new function of like these aprons and the punitive tax? Like, are we going to see teams now shop guys earlier? And I guess it's maybe, I think it's more likely that, you know, Patrick Dumont found out that Luka Doncic is a Democrat and they were like, no, get this guy out of here, because it doesn't, even in the most punitive salary cap era, if that's what you think this is, Luka Doncic is the exact player that you keep at whatever price point it takes. And the two things that I actually wanted to get to on this, yes, his conditioning is an issue, his complaining is an issue. To some extent, the Mavs have enabled that then.
Mhm.
There was Tim McMahon has said that Luka has like his own nutritionist and training staff. I want to know if those guys are training anybody else, because I have questions then. If those people are training anybody else, they do not belong in this line of work then. But also it's like, you know, I shouldn't even say that, because am I just the aesthetics of Luka? Don't like, he was apparently at 270 pounds this year at some point, according to McMahon. He should be in 240 to 250 when he's in shape. Like Jokic doesn't have that traditional aesthetic, and yet he's durable as hell. Yeah. And like Luka's played heavy minutes. He succeeded in the playoffs. And so if you had an actual problem with what he was doing in terms of coming in prepared to camp or staying with it in condition or his nutrition, as an organization, you need to figure out a way to make that work. And that's why I find what they've peddled so far insufficient. And it's I don't feel bad about criticizing them now, because now Nico Harrison has released enough statements that if there is more information, you've had a few opportunities to convey it out there. And the other thing that I can't wrap my head around, though, by the justification specifically with they don't want to pay him or the conditioning, Luka Doncic has never played off the ball more than he did this season. The Mavs have never been faster than these past 2 seasons with Luka Doncic. He has shifted, or they have shifted the way that they play with him there. And you could say about the defense, their defense after the trade deadline last year was elite. They were a top 10 defense with him this season too. So I think because none of this makes sense to me, that's where I land with you. Whereas, well, there has to be something else here. And I'm not necessarily wishing it. I don't want Luka to be going through a hard time. I don't want to find out that he's like a terrible human being. I don't even want to think that Nico Harrison and crew are just idiots. I am more inclined to believe like the conspiracy theories that like Patrick Dumont didn't want like a European headlining his team. Like, I'm more inclined to just believe that than I am that the Mavs really just didn't believe, like, truly that Luka was the guy to build around. Because what is the, like, so that's why I want to believe there's more information here. And by the way, there probably is, but at the same time, even if you don't want all this stuff to get out, haven't the Mavs kind of done a really poor job of like justifying this still?
Well, that's the thing, is it's like we just get deeper down the hole of, well, they're not going to come out. It'll be through leaks or whatever if this other shoe drops, and that the explanations were like grasping for. I think I don't know that we're going to get anywhere. I know I raised that side of it just because I can't stop thinking about it. But let's assume, or maybe we should just table that side of it, because we're just going to go in circles and like make up increasingly wild stuff just in hopes of getting some sense out of this. Let's talk about this. Like, okay, so it's done. So you're Dallas now. You have Anthony Davis, you have Kyrie Irving, you got a bunch of like, 3-and-D type players in between them. You have how many more years of Anthony Davis, all NBA superstar? 2?
Well, by the way, that's the other thing, not to circle back to that, but them deciding we're worried about Luka's conditioning and then trading for a billboard of durability like Anthony Davis. Really? I understand he's been durable the past 2 seasons. Typically, as you get older, you're not going to become more durable. I don't. And so I guess what were you getting at? Like,
well, I'm just getting at like, I wanted to move past the like trying to justify it and just look at like, so where is Dallas now? Just as a way, because what we knew is that last year's version of the Dallas Mavericks, basically unchanged, unless you really care about Klay Thompson versus Derrick Jones Jr., was in the finals. And this is a team that 2 years prior to that, again, led by Luka and a very different supporting cast, was in the conference finals. Like, you have Anthony Davis now. There's a chance, like, again, charitably, like maybe this fit works. Like maybe Kyrie and AD are like just an awesome pairing. Davis will, by the way, discussions about Davis this year involve talk of like a little bit of defensive slippage, like not the total game wrecking, like maybe best postseason defender on the planet type of thing. Maybe that'll change in Dallas or as they get in the playoffs. But like, you've swapped a mid-20s MVP candidate who led you to the finals for a guy who's about to turn 32. Kyrie's about to turn 33. And you don't have control of your first, I'm referring to the graphic now, in 27, 28, 29, or 30. So really right when you should expect Davis and Kyrie to fall off or whatever, you're not in charge of your firsts. So if and when you hit the tank, the payoff may not be there, won't be there unless you do something. Now you can trade Davis, you can trade Kyrie. Maybe you're going to get somebody else's first, but we talk about all the time, like, that's just the second best option, is having someone else's when you don't have yours, because it doesn't incentivize tanking.
And there's no team that has like all of theirs where they could be like, well, let's trade Anthony Davis here. They're kind of spread out.
Well, and so like if we take Dallas at its word on one of those quotes and say like, we were worried about this eventuality with Luka where we lose him for nothing, like that was 1, further off, and 2, just easier to manage, sign and trade, do whatever you got to do. Dallas just moved itself closer to the cliff. Like it deliberately moved closer to the cliff by trading mid-20s superstar for early 30s superstar. who just is objectively not as good, and didn't get the kind of draft package that might make like didn't give you the parachute to hop off that cliff with. So just from it's so rare to see a team. I mean, this is rare across the board, but you gave up a player that you were concerned about losing. You made your championship equity less. You shortened your championship window, and you made the landing way harder than it would have otherwise been. So like, I'm just really struggling to see how Dallas comes out of this as a winner in any way, unless you really care that they're now under the tax because AD waived his trade kicker.
I mean, well, the other thing here is like, you didn't even get the Lakers 2031 first rounder. This comes back to a little bit. Remember, one of our biggest criticisms when the Suns were negotiating for Kevin Durant was you were the team of one that he wanted and you gave up too much. This is a different situation. Like, I guess you could have canvassed the league for better, but you didn't want to. Mm-hmm. So did you I still think if you said to the Lakers, we're not giving you Luka unless you give us that 2031 first, is that really going to break the deal? So that's the other thing. And because the Lakers pick in 2029 is inherently less valuable because Luka Doncic is going to be on the team. And even if you when has it ever happened where someone who is like Luka Doncic has made 5 All-NBA teams before his 26th birthday? When does it ever happen that a perennial MVP candidate before they reach their mid-20s, their prime, just falls off? Like there's health issues or something. Like, when does that happen? Nothing to me springs to mind. So I don't know how you peddle it as a win. And I also don't, like, when we're actually getting into the nuts and bolts of, okay, well, what does this look like? To your point about waiting, now I guess you're certain that you're going to max out Kyrie when he opts out because he has all the leverage. That would be the other argument for waiting is, hey, make sure that Kyrie sticks around. Otherwise, what is the point of getting someone like Davis? And so I want to start here when kind of looking at the roster now. Do we just assume that before even getting into what we think they need, do we just assume now that like it's going to be Anthony Davis and when he's healthy, then Derek Lively and like that's the front court now? Because that's counterintuitive to us saying, Kyrie and AD might be a better fit than Luka and Kyrie. Not if you have a non-floor spacing big on the court with them. Yep. So I just but it seems like that's the plan because one, AD doesn't want to play center. Like he's made that very clear with the Lakers, and the reporting is that they were irked by this. By the way, that doesn't matter because the Lakers were not the ones to initiate these talks. So they might have been irked by it, but they didn't go shopping Anthony Davis after that. And I'm assuming that like the fact that AD waived his trade bonus here, like to help them duck the taxes, like, so him and Kyrie have wanted to play together, I think. So I get that, but there's probably also some promises made like, hey, we're bringing you here to not play center. And so they'll be monsters. They'll be huge.
They'll be really big.
Here's the trickle down effect. Like they were huge because Luka Doncic was a point guard, but like now PJ Washington is just a 3 in your corner lineups. And so what does that look like? But is that your expectation? Like that's the direction they're headed in because you're not, I think the alternative is if you even think that AD is going to be closing at the 5, you should just trade Derek Lively at that point to me.
Well, so I think we should assume that yes, AD will play a lot more forward. Partly because Dallas, when healthy, has 3 centers that need to play a lot, and I guess Davis is the best equipped of those to play power forward.
Anthony Davis is a power forward now, Grant. Like,
I think so. I think you're right. PJ Washington goes to the 3. Klay Thompson slides down to the 2. Kyrie 1. So you have some shooting just because like Klay is going to be guarded. Kyrie's a great shooter. PJ Washington in the right playoff series has been a great shooter. He's still not someone I think defenses freak out about. Your point of attack defense, I think, with Klay and Kyrie is going to suck. So the fix for that is just you're enormous across the board. And maybe that works, right? Like maybe you dominate the defensive glass. Maybe teams like the Thunder now are just like, we're getting one shot every time down. Like you can make the case again, charitably, that Dallas has like done a couple things or has made itself into a different team that with size and length could pose problems for the teams it's theoretically going to play in the postseason, I guess.
And
you've given up so much else to do this.
And I was going to say, like, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but like Max Christie's done a lot of that. Like he's turned into 3-and-D for the Lakers. And so you have him and Grimes. So if you think that you can get enough shooting and maybe one of those two is playing instead of Klay, but it's when the problem here is this Mavericks team. So, like, independent of the Luka thing, if we were ranking them in the Western Conference, everybody's healthy, you'd pick them to be top 6, right?
The current version?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
So it's like they're not a bad team,
Mm-hmm.
but they're, even if you believe in the interim, they can be as good. They short-circuited what feels like so much of their window.
Right.
Because it's just like Anthony Davis and Kyrie, assuming both of them are still there, by the time Dallas's picks are done conveying, they're going to be 37. Like, that's so old. And
Yeah.
so now, but they're overselling the win later thing. Okay, fine. Looking at the win now element, do you think that this team has enough shot creation here? I don't, like, Anthony Davis kind of been a beast on drives this year, and he's done a little bit more stuff with that. You have Spencer Dinwiddie, Jaden Hardy, I guess, and Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving is like your primary outside in shot creators. And so is that their biggest need in the aftermath of this? Or are you looking at, because you said 3-and-D guys, but like what we're saying when we say 3-and-D, like Clay kind of sacrifices the defense still there. Najee Marshall, you lose the 3. I guess PJ Washington does kind of typify that. Like Quentin Grimes is smaller. Max Christie has done that lately, but he doesn't have like this career-long track record of doing so. So you can make a case that, do you need more like dependable two-way wings on this team? So like, what do you kind of view as the biggest? You just lost Luka Doncic, so maybe that's the question. But it's like, what do you view as this roster's biggest need? And do you think that they're done for the rest of this trade deadline period specifically?
I mean, I don't know what else I guess they could flip that Lakers pick. I don't know what they can do that's like consequential. I think if the target is a win now thing, yeah, you just need, because Kyrie has had his own injury issues, and if you lose him, your playmaking is just zero. Like you just don't have any at all. And I think maybe that's, just thinking about it now, that's part of the reason Harrison is spinning this as like, we're going to be a defensive team, which is like, yeah, that's what you say when you're really big and can't shoot, and like you're going to struggle to make plays because you just traded basically the best singular generator of offense we've seen. I don't know, like in other than the Jokic in a really long time. Peak Harden, I guess maybe would be the comp. So yeah, it's got to be playmaking. It's got to be someone who does both 3-and-D, like maybe as good or better than PJ Washington. It's something like that. But that's what everybody wants. So I don't know. I don't know that you're going to be the market leader chasing that stuff down. I think, I don't know how much else you have this. Do you have more to go on Dallas? Because we really do need to talk about the Lakers side of this, even though that may be simpler.
Well, I found the timing interesting. For the last thing on Dallas is, wouldn't you? So I guess you don't expect them to do anything else, but I'm wondering, like, the fact that they made this move now with like a few days before the deadline, doesn't me believe like, no, they are trying to line up at least another move, because otherwise, what would be the value proposition of doing it now?
Right, because the Lakers are going to walk away from the table if you say we got hold on. We,
Right.
I agree. It's very hard to understand. Yeah, I mean, do I think they're going to do something else? You're asking me to predict what the Dallas Mavericks, who just traded Luka Doncic in the dead of night, are going to do. I guess probably they should. They should go get something else, because you're beyond all in now in the short term.
Yeah. By the way, the fact that you, just because you said that like, I didn't think it was real. I thought Shams was hacked.
Same.
But then, especially when Shams followed up by saying, yes, this is real, I was like, there's no way Shams is tweeting that. And then you saw all the other news reporters confirm it. I was like, there's no way they were like mass hacked, right? But it was still in the back of my mind, because that's how insane this trade still seems to me. But yeah, if you don't have any other thoughts on the Mavericks, I'm sure they'll come up tangentially. We can move on to the Lakers, which is just, so Luka's future, really quickly, you did mention this. He can sign for 4 years, $228.6 million this summer, an extension. But he will probably sign what we guess to be 3 years, $165.4 million with a player option that gets him back into free agency again for that 35% max, I think in the summer of 2028, which will be ahead of his age 29 season. That's my guess. I'm sure the Lakers will be fine with that. This is more interesting to me from the perspective of, but we could get to the other way. Every team in the league, if they had, like, if this was their team, like they make the Anthony Davis first round pick, Max Christie for Luka trade, right? Every single team says yes to that.
Yeah.
Now, and we're assuming they want Luka to debut before the All-Star break, and we're assuming they have access to medicals that we don't, that there's not something sinister around the corner when it comes to Luka's body type or his health. My question to you, before even getting into what this means for the future, not to make this all about LeBron, but do you make anything of we know LeBron has wanted to play with Luka. Wendy had just mentioned that LeBron said that years ago. But the fact that LeBron didn't know, do you read anything into that to where does this to you, I guess, does this make it less likely or more likely that LeBron is still on the Lakers, one, past the trade deadline, but two, entering next season?
I think you have to view it as it's less likely he's still there
Okay.
because in getting Luka, you're like, what your team is built around for as long as he's going to continue to be there. So you have the bridge. The bridge, it's not even a bridge. It's just like you have the best player you've had since. I mean, you could argue that Luka right now is better than LeBron was like in his first years with the Lakers. Like it's close, right? Like you just have the guy now. So you can swap LeBron for younger pieces or whatever, and you're fine. So I don't know that that's like, I kind of don't think the Lakers had, because of how quickly this came together and the fact that they didn't tell or consult anybody before, like LeBron, before this happened. It kind of seems like this just came to them and they're like, yeah, we have to say yes. We can't, like, I don't think they did this with any like second move in mind. It's just like when someone comes to you and says, we'll give you Luka for Anthony Davis and a first, you just do it. And then, okay, maybe we keep LeBron, maybe we don't. You know what I mean? I don't think you wouldn't have had to think, well, what does this mean for LeBron? Let's pause for a second before we say yes. Like, I think you just do it and worry about anything else later.
Well, the thing that peaked, and maybe I'm reading too much into the framing of this, but when it was reported that the Lakers saw this as, we have someone who can be the face of our franchise for the next decade, and we're giving Anthony Davis a win now move. And so I was like, so did they make this trade like not to, because I think you could reasonably say that unless they go, we assume they're going to go out and trade for a big, but if they're really thinking long term, and that phrasing, it prompted me to consider, well, are they like not making it for this season? And it's like they might trade LeBron, right? He has a no trade clause, of course, but they might trade LeBron to Golden State or something. Like they're not rebuilding because Luka's good enough, but they're doing sort of this like soft recalibration. Because am I just reading too much into the way that was phrased?
I mean, we're looking for answers no matter what, so it's impossible to read too much into anything right now. I do think, like, we've talked, I keep talking about how Dallas doesn't seem like a rational actor. The Lakers could be ultra rational, and they're like, yeah, we're rebuilding the whole thing now, so we can trade LeBron for a bunch of pieces that make sense around Luka, because they kind of do similar things, LeBron and Luka. Like, I still would be fascinated to see what this looks like with them together.
I hope we get some games with them on the same team, which means that LeBron can't be traded, is what I'm hoping for, at least this season.
Yeah, so I think if it's, so your original question was like less likely LeBron's on the team through the deadline and this offseason. It just has to be yes. Because now you can just reorient your whole team around a 25-year-old. So like, I think, yeah. Now the question is just timing, and then like, what's LeBron's actual value in a trade, and which teams are interested. Like, you hate to just jump to conclusion, but Golden State is a team, like, there were some rumblings, and they're like he makes more sense than Jimmy Butler or whatever else. Like that does seem possible.
And what would be if you had to, just before we move on from LeBron, Golden State, obviously, and like they have some interesting salary matching, and like the Lakers could view it as, well, if you get, let's say, Wiggins, and then there's maybe they like Kuminga or Pods, but it might be more about, well, if the Warriors are going to give us picks, and then that's stuff we have in our coffers to continue rebuilding the roster around Luka. But are there any other teams that you could envision LeBron like realistically waiving his no trade clause for?
Oh man, it's so tough. Like, it just has to be a team that is a massive title threat, right? That's the only, like, he's not going unless you think like Cleveland, Miami, we go through the usual suspects. Like, would he go to?
And no, by the way, you just named in Cleveland, even if LeBron wanted to go back there, I don't think you can make that trade right now, because you're giving up,
you'd have to give
like at least one of your core four players, if not two, to make that work.
And it's like, well, do the Lakers want, if from Cleveland's perspective, it's like you can have Jared Allen and whatever other salary it takes outside
Cruz,
of our
Isaac Okoro, and our 2031 first round pick. And if you're the Lakers, I mean, I guess that's like, all right. But
yeah, no, I don't think you do that.
Although Jared Allen and Luka would be a pretty good pairing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thunder, could, like, we're just going through teams where, because if you're LeBron, you're like, I'm not going to any team that's not like at least as good a title threat as
Right.
we were before with AD and are now with Luka. It's just he's in charge of this.
Would LeBron be like the basketball sicko who says like, I'll go to Denver, and then Denver has to build something around probably MPJ and Gordon, and then their 2031 pick?
I mean, like that at least satisfies the championship thing. And if you're not going to play with Luka, you get to play with Jokic.
It might be a dumb. I was just curious as to like,
no,
to me, it feels like Golden State or bust if they were going to move him. I was just like, what other teams would like? I guess from him, Cleveland would be interesting if because you could probably get to LeBron's money without trading Garland, Mitchell, or Mobley. I don't know what like your depth is just going to be obliterated at that point. But
how good are the Lakers right now?
They need a big man. Who's starting? Jackson Hayes?
Yeah. I mean,
that's Christian Wood when he's healthy.
Yeah. So they have to make a trade, but like, I guess, yeah, they've unbalanced the roster, I guess, to some extent, but obviously made a talent upgrade overall, assuming health and everything.
I hear Yusuf Nurkic might be available. You think
is he an upgrade over Jackson Hayes? I mean, considering salary, probably not.
No.
Like, that maybe that's part of it too, is like if Luka, now that you said they want him to come back sooner than later, if you're LeBron, you might look at this team now without Davis and with Luka and say like, it's possible we're worse if Luka's not healthy and the lack of the big man's a real issue. Maybe that gets you more likely to move.
Sorry, I keep interrupting. They defended their ass off without AD against the Knicks the other, but Max Christie was a part of that, and he no longer is. So.
I just, I mean, again, I think the take on it is the Lakers really weren't in a position to consider the other like fallout aspects of this trade. And they just like, it's not, you just say yes, right? And you just worry about what this means for LeBron and the rest of this year and the years after it like secondarily, like just Luka's on the table for this packet. Yeah, we do it and then figure everything else.
But you did ask an interesting question about how good they are right now, because I think that informs the LeBron part, of course, is huge, but it informs, well, what level of move do they make from here? Because now I think you could argue if LeBron and Luka Doncic are both on the roster and that's the plan, Austin Reeves becomes a little redundant unless you're looking for him to like kind of run stuff like, but you would stagger LeBron and Luka a ton. But let's say you want to move Reeves. Like, if you're the Lakers, I guess is my point. And let's assume that you're not moving LeBron. How aggressive are you being entering the trade deadline? Is it, well, we're considering they have their 2031 pick. They have Austin Reeves. It's just like their best assets. Like, are you considered doing something with that now? Or is it, no, we're going to try and pick up a big on the cheap, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do over the offseason when LeBron, he has a player option as well. And the reporting on that is, by the way, that he wanted another extension. So because I do think, I don't know if they're worse, but I would have said the version of the Lakers with Anthony Davis topped out at winning a playoff series. I think just because Luka is Luka, you could make but like not having another center on this roster right now, I would say that they probably have a similar ceiling. If not, maybe they could be more competitive in the second round or something.
Yeah, I mean, the center thing, all we've talked about leading up to the deadline is how many different center options there kind of are. And we just didn't like the prices for a lot of them in certain cases, but like they still got one of those firsts. They've got all this. They've got some, I mean, you don't have a ton of expiring or salary, but you got a lot of salaries that are like right in the right range that extend 1 year beyond this one. I'm talking about like Gabe Vincent or Rui, I guess. You can be the team that comes potentially with the best offer for Vooch or Robert Williams, or I mean, whoever else, Valanciunas. Like now all these centers that were like, we don't like it because AD plays the 4. Now it's just like, well, this guy's just a center and LeBron's your 4. It seems like the options make more sense, and the Lakers are still positioned to have potentially the best offer for a lot of guys that might have only commanded seconds or whatever. Now, whether they should trade this first is another question, but like, I think in a weird way, it's just easier now for them to go get a center. And I do think like, I kind of like the fit of Reeves here, just because if there were questions about him, I like him as a point guard. I think it's interesting. It was about like, can he be a primary playmaker? Well, now he's like third on that list. If you have Luka and LeBron, I think he's totally fine as like a tertiary playmaker that can be an awesome standstill shooter. Like that's also like been part of his, he's had to do different things, but like that really was like his ability to make open threes was never a question, right? Like that's something he can totally do. He's almost overqualified for it. So I like his fit. I'm moving that pick and some salary to try to get a big. And then, like, I don't know, the team gets pretty interesting if you do just get a capable center in there. And they can do that. They can, like, you can get Robert Williams on the team.
Come home.
Right? Like that's the need. Just go get a center, and you can do that now. And the question of how good are the Lakers today, I think not good enough is the answer probably to really chase a title. But they're like, because you have Luka, you just know that the supporting pieces around him don't actually need to be that great, because he'll just, the way he plays is like everybody else can just do the one or two things they're great at because he's doing all the lifting with everything else. Like can you make open threes? Great. Luka's going to create more than you've ever seen. Are you a decent roll man? Great. He's going to set you up better than you ever imagined. So like the level of player the Lakers need to significantly improve is just lower now, I guess is my take on it.
And so I agree that I like Reeves's fit still too. And I think he's still important until you decide, okay, like we're moving forward with LeBron as well, because he only really diminishes in importance if you know that LeBron is going to be on this team, let's say this time next year. So I wouldn't get rid of him. I also, by the way, I'm not giving up the 2031 first round pick either, because like it's the middle of the season. You're making this huge seismic shift to the foundation of your team. We don't even know what Luka's health is. So if you're firing that bullet, I'm waiting on it. And so I would very much be looking, and like some of the centers you named, I'm just like, what would the defense look like if you put Vooch or Jonas Valanciunas here all of a sudden? I'm like, is there a way to finagle getting Robert Williams III without giving up that first round pick? And even then it's, okay, well now you've solved, let's say 15 to 20 minutes per game. So like you still need Jackson Hayes, or maybe it's like, are you just playing with Jared Vanderbilt and LeBron as your front court? Or is there another cheaper center that you can go out and get? They might, honestly, when you look at their center, they were in the market for a center before, and we agreed that they needed a reserve center before they traded AD. We didn't want him to play next to said center necessarily. They might need to go out and get two bigs like for this. And so I'd be looking at those types of moves, because I'm just, yes, it's LeBron. There should be urgency if you want to keep him. I agree with what you said, though, that the upgrades can now be marginal enough to where they make a meaningful difference still. And you need to have more information on what this looks like and just the state of like the LeBron Luka dynamic moving forward before you would move either one of your, I would say two of your three. Like I would move Dalton Connect. That's fine with me. That's okay. But I'm not moving the 2031 first or Reeves right now.
Can I ask you two unrelated questions? The first answer is probably short. One is, if Dallas says we need both of those first and Dalton Connect and like literally anything else we could possibly ask for if you want Luka, don't the Lakers still do it?
Yeah.
That's okay. Agreed.
You would have roped in if they wanted Reeves and like his salary was more, so the structure could have been weird. They're looking to deduct the tax. You could have roped in other teams. They would have done it. I think borderline, if you insisted on the 2031 first round pick, I do not care what the reporting is coming out of LA. They absolutely would have given Dallas that first round pick.
So I agree. Just another baffling element of like, how do you not just ask for everything if you're Dallas? Second question is like ripple effect wise, and you can take it from the new version of Dallas and the new version of the Lakers. Does this do anything to change plans of any other teams at the deadline, specifically in the West?
Well, I mean, at this point, let's say, so who do you think is the most urgent Western Conference buyer?
So let's go through the ones that would care. OKC, Memphis, Houston, Minnesota, Denver.
I think it changes behavior in the sense that this should embolden you to call and see about Wemby's availability.
Yeah, right. Hey, so yeah, you should call Boston and be like, are you guys looking to get off Tatum? It just like, yeah, but I think so. To answer my own question, I'm not sure. I don't think so, because I think Dallas was viewed as the bigger threat with Luka, and now we agree they're probably worse. And the Lakers weren't taken real seriously as a threat. I don't think. Negative point differential, injury concerns with AD and LeBron. You know, like I don't think either of these teams now profiles as is such a different this year threat that if you're the Thunder, you're like, well, now we got to counter. We got to do something. I think you're still operating with whatever level of urgency you had before this trade.
I think, honestly, it'll change. Matt Ishbia can't not be the primary subject. So Phoenix is absolutely trading all those picks now and doing something. They can't lose the headline story to the Lakers. But no, you bring up an interesting point, because this trade is it's not even, I call it seismic. This is the most shocking trade in NBA history.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's changed like anything about this year.
Isn't that weird?
Right. It's so bizarre. And like, that's why, maybe that's also why I was latching on to the framing of the Lakers gave Anthony Davis a win now move. Like, oh, were the Lakers not trying to win?
Right.
So
did him a favor.
this is so long-term focused by the Lakers, and the Mavs, I think at best are like as likely to win the title. I would argue that they're just worse off in terms of the championship discussion. So I don't think it changes any like real urgency in the West I mean, I think it makes if you had to pick between these two teams, what should you prefer to face? Let's assume the Lakers get a big of some close to starter level quality. Which team would you be more worried about facing? Matchups matter, of course. Like OKC might just prefer the Lakers over the Mavericks, but just in a vacuum, which team, if the Lakers get a big, would you be more worried about facing in a 7-game series?
I think it's the Lakers, just because we've seen Luka just, if he'll be the best player in any series he plays. And like, I know I always revert to that. And there's just like, you can imagine solutions as an opponent of Dallas of like, they don't space it well. Like Kyrie is overburdened as the only creator on the team. The Lakers just have Luka, and Luka can just win playoff series by himself. So I'm more worried about playing the Lakers, I guess, even though, I mean, right. I think that's the answer.
I know. I agree with you. It's just a Luka. I mean, Luka and LeBron. It was always we don't want to face LeBron and AD. And now it's like LeBron and Luka. So it's the roster still doesn't quite make sense. And by the way, circling back to your other thing about would this change anything in the West? I do wonder, like, the team that it would, if I'm not being facetious, I was being an asshole about the Suns. If there's any team's behavior this is going to change, it would be Golden State's, right?
Yeah,
like,
I think that's right. Because now you make the call. You say you say like the Lakers now, at least the Lakers have 2 timelines, Dan. So the Warriors are like, we get it. We'd like LeBron.
Or do you flip it? I don't know necessarily that Golden State would do this when only the 2031 pick is available, but Luka Doncic was just traded. Like, are you calling Golden State to see about Draymond Green and him being your starting center next to Luka and LeBron?
I mean, every team should be calling the Warriors about Steph. If like this, like, right? Like, this is,
if there's one takeaway from this podcast, I just want all the kids, all the dreamers I just want to let you know, you keep trade machining your heart out. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it, because shit like this happens all the time. If you didn't have anything more localized to the Lakers, I did have a macro question about the league.
I have one other thought that I keep wanting to get out there. Kind of more Dallas centric. I know I should have brought this up earlier. I think that it's possible that Dallas, given its circumstances and what it knows and believes about Luka, kind of made like the right decision, which is to say, but it will turn out to be wrong, which is to say, maybe his conditioning issues were never going to get better. Maybe there's other stuff we don't know about. And like that Dallas maybe hypothetically correctly concluded, we can't like go forward with this guy as our main player, considering what we're going to have to pay him and just the trend line of whatever trends we're concerned about with him. Now that he's changed teams, now that he's had like a little wake up call of being traded after thinking, like, it could be that his habits or whatever the issues are change now that he's on the Lakers, where they would never have continuing to be in Dallas. Like, sometimes this happens where it's like a dressed up version of the change of scenery argument, where it's like all these problems might have persisted in Dallas and made it untenable. Now that he's on a new team after being traded, he cleans everything up. Like, so Dallas could have been right to say this isn't going to work, and then it'll still look terrible and be wrong because Luka changing teams solves all the problems that led to him being traded. So it's just like such a lose-lose for Dallas from an optics standpoint.
Well, but to that point, isn't there also an element don't we hear this from pro athletes all the time, where it's they don't start taking when they're super young, like their conditioning and their nutrition gets on a like better point as they get older. And so that's a little like there are some guys that come in and they're like psychos, but like LeBron was always in great shape, but like, was he always on top of his nutrition? Like until probably not until like the middle of his late 20s. And Lucas,
so you have to be.
Yeah. So that would be the one hang up there. But yeah, this is just, even if the Mavericks were justified in thinking this way, now there's just a greater chance that Luka goes on to prove them wrong, or that he's able to be a better version of the player that we already saw.
Like, how mad is he? I mean, probably not mad, because he gets to go to LA and play with LeBron and is going to be a bigger icon than ever because of the market he's in. but like this could be the Luka revenge tour for like 5 years, like, or longer. It really could just be him saying, I'll show you, which is like, he was good enough already. He doesn't need this, like, I got to prove myself now angle. It could get real scary how good he might get.
The more macro question I wanted to touch on, and we did talk about it a little bit at the start, is that some people have posited that this is the Luka Doncic situation is a ripple effect of the new CBA, or how expensive these contracts are getting, the penalties when it comes to spending as a team. And we've already seen, so it was the Mavericks and the Clippers. We had 14 teams in the luxury tax. 2 of them have already ducked it. And so some people are positing that this is the start of a trend. And you can't discredit someone from thinking that way, because Luka Doncic is one of the 5 best players in basketball and was just traded before that contract. But we're talking, the trend that I'm referencing is trading these guys if they didn't, as reports say, he didn't ask for out, and before their 3rd contract, because you're either worried about paying them a regular max or a super max. Do you think that I guess I'll frame it this way. Do you think that there's a chance the bar for giving out these 3rd contracts is now higher in this new CBA? Does this trade say anything about that to you, or do you view this as just a completely anomalous, if not inane situation?
I think you have to, I think that's, yes. I think it does mean that teams are going to be, at least at the moment, because this is another thing too, like, we're still like, rosters for the most part are still, they were built under the old rules, right? Like, so the rosters that exist around the league are mostly products of the previous CBA. And so like this, as opposed to like a new trend, this might be more of an adjustment period where, like, once rosters are built with the new rules in mind, give it like a 3-year timeline or whatever, then teams are better positioned to give out those 3rd contracts and those 35% and whatever. But I do think you look at the Fox situation too. That's kind of another one where there's at least an element of, he might have come up, he may still, unlikely, but be eligible for the Supermax. And some part of the Kings' willingness to move him might be tied to not wanting to pay that. Mm-hmm. Whatever the bar is, Luka was over it though, right? So I don't know if you can view this like as an independent like data point that justifies like what you're saying. So it's you could still be right. And I think like, yeah, it's just the penalties are more restrictive and teams should be more careful about giving out these contracts. That's kind of always been true. Mm-hmm. But I think the combination of like, teams have had to endure a rule change and are kind of like trying to figure out what the best way to build a roster is, with just like the general fear of like looking at Phoenix's future and how bleak it is, and just like the general reluctance to spend big. Like, I think there's some of that. Hopefully it does make that extra big Supermax like something you only give to a select few players, as opposed to like, well, we've got a very good rookie, he's the best player on our team, he's just finished his rookie scale deal, we just give it to him. Like, I think that is the sensible way to build teams, where the Supermax really is for like true superstars. But it's so hard for me to look at this trade and say anything about it is like indicative of broader trends, just because it is so strange. And whatever threshold you would say a player needs to get over to earn a Supermax, Luka has been over it since like his 2nd year. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if Luka.
Well, you would assume, but like if Luka Doncic is not above that threshold, then I guess nobody is. There's nobody is. And then I am just curious, and I would have never predicted this, and I will destroy these franchises if it comes to it, but it's just like, this would be like Anthony Edwards might be a good analog for this. He's not on the same level as Luka Doncic right now, but you look at Minnesota's track record of spending, and if they decide that he's not like, he's the nice in between Fox and Doncic, where it's Anthony Davis is clearly like an all NBA player or a perennial all NBA candidate now, at least that's the track he's on. Are we going to see these issues? We have to wait. I guess we need a larger sample size.
SGA would be another one. We'll see, right? That'll be a good.
But I can't. I'm like you. I can't view this like independent instance as the start of a broader trend, because what would be the point of having a Supermax if a top 5 player in the NBA isn't worth it?
Right. And unless all those like spooky, we don't know, like off court stuff, unless that's part of it. But even then, it's just like that's so speculative. We can't like rely on that as the reason.
the lengths that teams go and still win to accommodate superstars, like it's just like what would you need to find out to believe that it was so far gone? It would have to be like Luka Doncic actually did want out and was withholding services this whole time, basically. And even then, you have to question the Mavericks because even if the Mavs made the right decision, they still went in the wrong direction.
I agree.
We said this about the Kings too with De'Aaron Fox. Is we know what they're going to do, something on a lower scale of this. They're going to prioritize players who can help them win now. That's not the right decision because there's no way, no matter all your concerns about his conditioning, his stamina, his complaining, you're not like, you can't be a better basketball team sustainably over the medium or long term if you're trading away Luka Doncic. I just won't buy it. And so I'm fascinated to, like, we're going to be talking about this trade for years or like, if not decades. And we've been cautioned that the trade deadline was going to be boring and maybe all the action is getting out beforehand, but the fireworks just like might not be done because these two teams specifically, what if the Lakers decide we're going to move LeBron or we're moving over with Luka and LeBron and now we're going to go out and get somebody else? Or if the Mavs really believe they can win now, are they going to put the Lakers pick on the table? Are they going to put their 2031 pick on the table and do something? We still have the De'Aaron Fox situation. No one's off limits apparently. Where is Steph going to be playing this time next week, Grant? I have no clue. I have no idea.
It's a great reminder that like whatever the wildest scenario you can come up with is just not wild enough. Because how many fake trades do we make up and or look at? Never once did I come across anything like this, even as like a joke.
We would have been destroyed by certainly Dallas fans if we proposed this trade. Like it was that's be kinder to people who come up with fake trades unless it's clearly a joke or something, because first of all, I never even would have proposed it. So
this doesn't get off the ground. This is one where your editor comes back and says like, I don't think this is going to fly.
And it's like, we want traffic, but we can't know. We're going to delete this one.
We want serious trades, please. Or like semi-serious.
Do you have any, here's my final thing is that we could talk like Luka's for partially hydrogenated oils maybe spurred the Mavs to move him, or do they really just want to duck the tax? It's the only way they saw how to do it. They had to move Luka.
If this is the only way they saw how to do it, they should have looked harder, is what I would say to that.
Look at it. They used Luka Doncic to get off of Markieff Morris and Maxi Kleber's
Great asset management. So, sometimes you got to break a few eggs. Wild. Craziest trade. It still doesn't feel real. Unbelievable.
Do you want to take us out of here before? I'll let our listeners know before you go into your spiel. We will not be back most likely before the trade deadline in case something happens. We had plans to record on Monday, but we assumed something was going to be blown up. I assume we will be back again before Thursday, but now that we're still assuming that, I just have no clue about what's going to happen.
I issue this as a challenge to the NBA. We probably won't do an emergency pod unless something is at least as consequential as the trade that just happened. Prove us wrong. Make us pod, NBA.
Just like Luka did not cross the threshold for the Supermax, we are now holding all emergency podcasts to the Luka Doncic to the Lakers bar.
Beat this trade. We'll pod again. Let's see it. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. I hope this helped you process a truly unprocessable seismic, that's the word we keep using, NBA move. Completely bonkers. Rate, review, subscribe. Leave us some comments here. Let's make this a support group for people that can't believe the NBA can be this nuts. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.